Elliot's heart raced as he stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the alien ship. The gravity felt different here, heavier and yet lighter at the same time. It was strange. He adjusted to it quickly, but his mind was still trying to grasp the vastness of what had just happened. He had been selected to accompany a diplomatic mission to the star system of the alien queen Zalathra. This was not just any mission. It was the mission. Humanity's first attempt at peace with an empire that spanned multiple galaxies. The ship was enormous, towering with strange, smooth surfaces that seemed to shift and shimmer as if alive. There was a soft hum vibrating through the air, and the walls glowed faintly in patterns Elliot could not quite decipher. It was beautiful, yes, but also overwhelming. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. As he followed the others down the long, winding halls, the silence weighed heavily on him. The crew members, alien beings with sharp features and eyes like mirrors, didn't speak much. They simply observed. "Welcome to Zalathra's ship," an officer said, his voice cold but polite. He was tall, his skin a dark violet that seemed to absorb the light. Elliot nodded, trying his best to hide his nervousness. They arrived at a massive chamber, the throne room of the queen herself. It was vast, with walls that stretched higher than any building Elliot had ever seen. In the center of the room, sitting on a throne of what appeared to be black crystal, was Zalathra, the queen of the empire. She was unlike anything Elliot had ever seen. Her skin was pale, nearly silver, and her eyes, they glowed with an eerie, almost otherworldly light. Her long, flowing hair shifted colors with each movement, a cascade of deep blues and purples. She exuded power, confidence, and a terrifying beauty. Elliot stood before her, his hands sweating despite the coolness of the room. The air seemed thicker here, as if the weight of the queen's gaze alone could crush him. But he couldn't show fear. This was history in the making. The first human to stand in the presence of Zalathra. It had taken decades for the humans to make contact with her people, and now in this very moment peace was within their grasp. It had to be. "Elliot of Earth." Her voice rang out, clear and commanding. "I have heard much about your kind. Tell me, what do you think you can offer us?" Elliot swallowed hard, his throat dry. "We're here to offer peace, an alliance. We believe that humans, with our resourcefulness, can aid in building something greater. Together." Her eyes studied him closely. There was no judgment in her stare, but there was something cold, calculating. She wasn't simply listening. She was measuring him, weighing him against her millennia of experience. Her eyes glowed brighter, and Elliot felt his knees tremble slightly. "What makes you think your kind is capable of anything more than survival?" Zalathra asked. "Your species is young, small and weak compared to the empires of the galaxy." Elliot didn't flinch. "Because we've survived when others thought we couldn't. Because even in the darkest moments we find a way to move forward. Our strength lies in our will to keep going no matter the odds." The queen tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The human spirit. You call it strength. I call it stubbornness." A chill ran down Elliot's spine, but he refused to show it. Instead, he took a step forward, his voice gaining confidence. "You may call it what you will, but there's something more. There's something in humanity that no one can take away. Even you." Zalathra's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing into him as if she were searching for a weakness. Elliot stood, tall, despite the overwhelming presence of the queen. He knew he had to be bold. The fate of humanity rested on these words, on this moment. "The light outshines the stars," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He hadn't meant to speak like that, but it felt right. Zalathra didn't blink. Her face remained cold, but her eyes flickered with something Elliot couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe something more. He had no idea how she would respond, but he could feel the weight of the moment. It was like a spark had ignited in the room. The queen shifted slightly, the silence stretching long. Elliot could feel the tension hanging thick in the air. He wondered if he had said too much, He wondered if he had made a mistake. But then, Zalathra spoke, her voice softer this time. "Interesting," she said almost to herself. "Perhaps you are not entirely useless, human." Elliot wasn't sure what to make of that. Was it a compliment? A dismissal? The Queen's words were often difficult to interpret. But for now he would take it as a sign that there was still hope. This wasn't the end of their conversation. It was just the beginning. "You may stay," Zalathra continued, her tone now more neutral. "We shall see if your species truly has the strength to offer something beyond survival." As the Queen stood, her presence filling the room, Elliot couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could prove itself worthy of her attention. But even as he stood there watching the Queen's every move, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger. The Queen, for all her power, was not invincible. There was a light inside Elliot, and he was beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, the Queen saw it too. Elliot spent the next few days aboard Zalathra's massive ship, moving through its endless, shining corridors. The crew of the Queen's personal guard barely acknowledged him, their presence as imposing as the ship itself. Yet, in every silent glance, Elliot could feel their eyes on him, watching, judging. There was a sense of tension in the air that had nothing to do with the war, the politics, or even the power that the Queen held. It had everything to do with him. One lone human, standing before the might of an empire. But despite the heavy atmosphere, Elliot kept his composure. He had faced impossible odds before. This was just another challenge, another moment where humanity had to prove it could endure. Zalathra, too, seemed to change with each passing day. Her presence was as commanding as ever, but Elliot noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity or perhaps something deeper. He couldn't quite understand it, but it was there. He had caught glimpses of her in the corridors, glances that suggested she was thinking, watching, maybe even waiting for something. It wasn't long before that moment arrived. It happened during a formal gathering, a meeting where representatives from various parts of the galaxy came to discuss the future of their alliance with Zalathra's empire. Elliot was not supposed to be in the room, but Zalathra had insisted. His words had piqued her interest, and now she wanted him there. She had given him a seat among her trusted advisors, and he sat with them, unsure of his place in the grand scheme of things. The room was filled with beings from all over the galaxy, creatures of every shape and size, their faces strange and their eyes glimmering with the weight of their own empires. It was clear they were all waiting for Zalathra to speak, to make a decision that would change the course of the galaxy. And then she turned to him. "Elliot of Earth," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've spoken of humanity's strength, of light. But I wonder, can you truly prove it? Can your people back up their words?" Her eyes locked onto his, and the room fell even quieter. Elliot could feel every gaze upon him, but none more than the Queen's. It was a challenge, but it was not spoken directly. It was a test that no one else could understand. Zalathra's presence was so powerful that even the air around her seemed to bend, to obey her every command. She could end his life with a single gesture if she wanted to, and yet, she waited. She waited for his response. Elliot took a deep breath. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was calm. He had faced death before. He had stared it in the face and walked away. But this was different. This was an alien queen, a being that could end the life of any human with a flick of her hand. Yet there was no fear in him. "Only resolve, we can prove it," he said, his voice steady, though inside he could feel his pulse racing. "We've survived wars, famine, disasters. We've fought enemies far stronger than ourselves. We don't give up. We stand, even when everything seems lost. We fight for the future, for hope." The room was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, and Elliot could see the faintest flicker of something in them. Something almost like a smile. But not quite survival, Zalathra said, her voice low. That's what you call strength, but survival is not enough, human. Strength is power, control, dominance. If your species truly wishes to stand at my side, you will have to prove that you can achieve more than just survival. Elliot looked around at the faces of the other delegates. They were all waiting for him to respond, to say something that would change the course of this encounter. But what could he say? He had already said what he believed. The human spirit wasn't about power or dominance. It was about the will to live, to keep going no matter what. But in Zalathra's eyes, that was not enough. He stood up from his seat, the room suddenly feeling smaller, the weight of all those watching him pressing down. Then let me prove it to you, he said, his words ringing with quiet confidence. Zalathra didn't respond immediately. She only stared at him, her gaze piercing, as if she were reading him like an open book. Elliot could feel every second stretch out, the tension in the room growing thick. He could see her lips move slightly, but no sound came. Elliot's mind raced as he walked down the long corridor leading to the arena. Every step felt heavier, each footfall echoing in the silence of the massive ship. His heart beat faster with every passing moment. The Queen had given her challenge, and now he had to face it. There was no backing out. The trial was set to take place in the arena, a large open space deep within Zalathra's ship. It was a place where only the strongest faced each other in battles that determined the fate of entire civilizations. Elliot had no idea what to expect. Zalathra's warriors were rumored to be fierce, unmatched in combat. The very thought of facing one of them made his stomach turn, but he couldn't show fear. He couldn't let humanity's chance slip through his fingers. The halls were quiet, save for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Elliot's footsteps grew louder as he neared the arena. He could already feel the heat rising from the chamber ahead. The doors slid open with a hiss, and he was greeted by a scene unlike any he had ever imagined. The arena was vast, bigger than any sports field on Earth. The floor was made of smooth stone, worn from countless battles. Surrounding the arena were towering walls, and at the very top, the seats for the audience stretched high into the ship's walls. In the center of it all stood Zalathra, her eyes glowing like twin stars, watching him intently. Her presence filled the entire space, making the air feel thick with tension. A low murmur rose from the crowd above, and Elliot could see the alien spectators leaning forward in their seats, eager to see the human who dared to challenge their queen's warrior. "You are brave, human," Zalathra said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "But bravery alone will not win you this battle. You must have more than that." Elliot stood tall, his fists clenched at his sides. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Words were meaningless now. He would prove himself with his actions. From across the arena, a figure emerged, a massive alien, easily twice the size of Elliot. His skin was dark and smooth, with sharp features and glowing red eyes. The warrior's muscles rippled under his skin as he moved, each step shaking the ground. His presence alone was enough to make Elliot feel small, insignificant. But he didn't flinch. He had no choice but to stand his ground. The alien warrior was known as Korath, Zalathra's most trusted champion. His reputation was legendary. No one had ever defeated him in combat. He was a living legend, and now Elliot had to face him. "Korath," Zalathra called out, her voice commanding. "Show the human the strength of my empire." Korath nodded silently, stepping forward with a calm, almost predatory grace. He cracked his knuckles as he approached, and Elliot could hear the crowd growing, silent. All eyes were on him. Elliot took a deep breath. His fingers brushed against the hilt of the weapon he had been given. A simple sword, nothing special compared to the advanced weapons of the aliens. But it was all he had. He would have to make it work. Korath didn't wait for Elliot to make the first move. With a sudden roar, the alien lunged forward, his massive fists swinging toward Elliot. The force behind the punch was enough to send a shockwave through the air, and Elliot barely managed to duck in time. The ground beneath him cracked as the alien's fist slammed into it. Elliot's heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, dodging another punch from Korath. He had never faced anything like this before. The alien was fast, strong, and relentless. Elliot could feel the weight of the fight bearing down on him. His legs burned with exhaustion and his arms ached from the strain of blocking and dodging. But he couldn't give up. The crowd above cheered, their voices a constant roar that filled the arena. Every move Elliot made seemed to draw more eyes. The pressure was overwhelming, but he knew he had to keep going. This was for humanity. This was for the future. Korath came at him again, this time swinging a massive sword. The blade was as long as Elliot was tall, and it gleamed in the light. Elliot barely had time to react as Korath swung it toward him, but he managed to raise his own sword in time to block the strike. The force of the impact nearly knocked him off his feet, but he held firm, gritting his teeth against the pain. He couldn't let this alien defeat him. Not here. Not now. Elliot stepped back, taking a moment to reassess. He needed to think, to strategize. He couldn't match Korath's strength or speed, but there was something humans had that Korath didn't: resourcefulness. As Korath charged, again Elliot spun to the side, using his smaller frame to his advantage. He dodged the alien's blows, slipping between strikes, getting closer with every movement. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as Elliot fought for every inch. The warriors. Attacks were powerful, but they were also predictable. Korath was accustomed to fighting opponents who couldn't evade him, but Elliot wasn't like the others. He used his speed, his agility, and his mind. Then, as Korath raised his sword for another overhead strike, Elliot saw his chance. He lunged forward, catching the alien off guard. He ducked under the swing, coming up behind Korath. With a swift motion, he struck at the alien's exposed side, landing a blow that sent a shock through his opponent. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough to make Korath stagger. The crowd gasped, and for a moment, Elliot saw something in Korath's eyes, a flicker of doubt. The warrior didn't hesitate, though. With a growl, he turned and swung his sword toward Elliot, but this time the human was ready. Elliot ducked low, sliding beneath the alien's swing, and used the momentum to push Korath off balance. Korath stumbled, and Elliot pressed his advantage. With a quick strike, he disarmed, the alien sending the massive sword flying from his hand. The crowd erupted in shock, and even Zalathra raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by the human's skill. Korath, though stunned, wasn't finished. He charged at Elliot once more, but this time, Elliot was prepared. With a final, decisive strike, he landed a blow to Korath's chest, knocking the wind out of him and sending him crashing to the ground. For a long moment, the arena was silent. Then, slowly, the crowd erupted into applause. Elliot stood over the fallen alien, breathing heavily, his body covered in sweat and bruises. He had done it. Against all odds, he had defeated the greatest champion of Zalathra's empire. He turned to face the queen, who stood at the edge of the arena, her eyes unreadable. Her gaze was intense, but there was no anger in it. Instead, there was something else. Something that Elliot could only describe as respect. Zalathra nodded slowly. "You have proven yourself human," she said, her voice ringing out across the arena. "Perhaps there is more to your kind than I thought." Elliot stood tall, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He had done it. For humanity. For the light that outshined the stars. The arena was silent as Elliot stood victorious over Korath. His chest heaved with each breath, his muscles aching from the brutal fight. His sword, though not as sharp as the alien's, had proved more than capable. He had done what many thought impossible. He had beaten Zalathra's greatest champion. But even as the crowd's cheers echoed in his ears, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. Zalathra's gaze on him was no longer one of simple curiosity or challenge. It was more complicated. Her eyes lingered on him, unreadable, as if she were seeing something new, something unexpected. Korath, groaning in pain, struggled to rise from the ground, his pride wounded more than his body. Elliot didn't move to strike again. He didn't need to. The fight was over. Zalathra stepped forward from the shadows of the arena, her long, flowing robes trailing behind her. The crowd fell silent once more, their eyes locked on the queen. Her presence was commanding, her beauty intimidating. But there was something else now. Something in the way she watched Elliot as though she were seeing a new side of him, a side she hadn't expected. "You have proven yourself," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "Humanity is more than just survival. But what lies beneath your strength? What drives you?" Elliot didn't know how to answer. How could he explain the depth of what drove him, what drove humanity? It wasn't something he could simply put into words, but he had to try. He had to make Zalathra understand. "We fight," Elliot said slowly, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Not just to survive, but to protect what matters. Our families, our homes, the people we love. We fight because we believe that there's always a chance for a better tomorrow, no matter how hard things get." Zalathra's eyes softened for a brief moment, but it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. She turned away, her expression hardening once more. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "there is something to this human spirit you speak of." Elliot watched as the Queen made her way to the edge of the arena, her footsteps graceful and measured. She was a being of immense power, and yet, in this moment, she seemed almost vulnerable. It was strange to see her like this, and for a brief moment, Elliot wondered if there was more to her than he had first believed. But before he could think too much on it, Zalathra spoke again, her voice echoing through the arena. "This is not the end, human," she said, her tone more somber now. "You may have won the fight, but the true test has only just begun. Your victory has earned you a place at my side, but it has also earned you a role in the future of this galaxy." Elliot's heart skipped a beat. The future of the galaxy? This was far bigger than anything he had anticipated. What did Zalathra mean by that? "Tell me, Elliot of Earth," the Queen continued, turning back to face him. "Why do you fight for peace?" Why? Elliot couldn't shake the weight of the Queen's words. The mission Zalathra had given him was unlike anything he had imagined. He had thought this was a chance to build an alliance, to show the galaxy that humanity was more than just survivors. But now he was being sent to a planet on the edge of the galaxy, a world that had resisted Zalathra's empire for centuries. His task was to bring the rebels to heel, to make them submit to the Queen's rule. The idea didn't sit well with him. It never had. Elliot had always fought for peace, for understanding between different worlds. But this felt more like a betrayal. He stood at the edge of the ship's observation deck, looking out at the vast expanse of stars. The blackness of space stretched before him, endless and full of possibility. But his heart was heavy. He had come to the Queen's ship, to negotiate peace, not to be turned into a tool of conquest. "Are you still thinking about it?" a voice behind him asked. Elliot turned to see Liana, one of the human crew members who had accompanied him on the mission. She had been there from the beginning, and though she wasn't part of the diplomatic talks, she had become his confidant. Her presence was a comfort, a reminder that not all humans had lost sight of their ideals in the face of the alien empire. "Yeah," Elliot sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I don't know if I can do this, Liana. This isn't what I signed up for." Liana stepped closer, her face serious. "You've always been the one to push for peace, Elliot. But sometimes peace isn't something you can just ask for. Sometimes you have to fight for it." Elliot frowned. "Fight for it? By doing exactly what the Queen wants? She wants me to conquer a planet, to force them into submission. That's not peace." Liana didn't reply immediately. She just stood there, looking out at the stars with him. It wasn't until several moments passed that she spoke again. "Maybe it's not about submission," she said quietly. "Maybe it's about finding a way to get them to understand. You don't have to follow Zalathra's orders blindly, Elliot. But you do have a chance to show them that humanity has something worth fighting for. You're not like the rest of them. You can make your own choice in how to approach this." Elliot's eyes narrowed. Liana was right, in a way. He didn't have to simply carry out Zalathra's plan. There had to be another way. A way where he could fulfill the mission without losing his integrity. "I still don't know how," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "What if I fail? What if I can't bring peace without sacrificing everything I believe in? Liana gave him a small, knowing smile. You won't know until you try. Elliot looked at her, and for the first time in days, he felt a small spark of hope. He had been so focused on the mission, on the pressure from Zalathra and the expectations of the galaxy, that he had forgotten the most important thing, his own ability to make choices. Thanks, Liana, he said quietly. I needed that. She nodded. Anytime. Now go do what you do best. Show them what humanity is capable of. With a final look at the stars, Elliot turned and walked out of the observation room, determination setting in his chest. He had a choice to make, and he wasn't going to let anyone else dictate it for him, not even Zalathra. The journey to the rebel planet. The ship moved through the blackness of space faster than any human-made craft. They were headed to a planet located on the outer rim of the galaxy, a place that had become infamous for its resistance against Zalathra's empire. The planet, Dara, had seen countless battles, its surface scarred by centuries of conflict, but the people of Dara were fierce, and they would never give up their freedom without a fight. Elliot stood at the helm of the ship, watching the planet grow larger as they approached. He could already see the faint outlines of the surface through the ship's viewports, vast cities surrounded by endless stretches of desert with mountains rising sharply in the distance. It looked like a place that had endured much, but also one that had managed to hold on to its spirit. We're entering the atmosphere, Liana's voice called out from the communications console. Elliot nodded, his fingers tightening around the railing. He had no idea what to expect when they landed. The rebels on Dara were known to be resourceful and dangerous, but he couldn't allow fear to hold him back. This wasn't just a mission to him anymore. It was a test of everything he believed in. As the ship descended through the clouds, Elliot's thoughts turned to Zalathra. The Queen had given him a mission, but Elliot knew that her view of peace was different from his own. She saw it as something to be controlled, to be enforced. But for Elliot, peace was a choice that came from mutual respect and understanding. It wasn't something that could be forced by a superior power. It had to be earned. The ship touched down softly, its landing gear scraping against the rocky surface of the planet. Elliot took a deep breath and stood up from his seat. The door to the ship slid open, revealing a group of armed rebels waiting outside. They were a mix of species, their faces hardened by years of war. Each one carried a weapon, and their eyes were filled with suspicion. One of them, a tall woman with short black hair and a scar across her cheek, stepped forward. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Elliot held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to talk. I was sent by Queen Zalathra." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Zalathra? We don't want anything to do with her or her empire. You're wasting your time." Elliot didn't flinch. "I'm not here to force you to join the empire. I'm here to offer something different. I'm here to show you that humanity can bring something to this galaxy that no one else can. A choice." The woman looked at him skeptically. "A choice? You really think we'll just lay down our arms and follow you?" "I'm not asking you to follow me," Elliot said. "I'm asking you to listen, to hear what we have to offer. We can stand together as equals without needing to fight." The woman seemed to hesitate, but then she motioned for him to follow. "We'll listen. But don't think for a second that you've won us over." Elliot nodded, relieved that they hadn't immediately rejected him. He followed the woman into the rebel camp where a small group of leaders had gathered. They were just as wary of him as she was, but Elliot could see the flicker of curiosity in their eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he could prove to them that humanity was more than just another empire. The first meeting, Elliot sat down at a rough wooden table in a small, dimly lit room facing the rebel leaders. The room was sparse, the walls lined with maps of the planet's surface and tactical charts. The rebels were clearly preparing for something, but it wasn't clear what. "What's your plan, human?" the woman with the scar asked, her eyes locked on him. "Why should we trust you?" I'm not asking you to trust me, Elliot replied. I'm asking you to trust humanity. We've been through battles too. We've fought wars of our own. But we don't fight just for power or control. We fight for what's right. And I'm here to show you that we're willing to fight for peace. One of the other rebels, a man with a shaved head and a scarred arm, shook his head. Peace? You think we can just make peace with the Empire? They've been trying to crush us for years. I know, Elliot said quietly. But the Empire isn't the only way. There are other ways to bring about change. Ways that don't involve endless war. The rebel leaders exchanged looks. The room filled with the weight of the decision they had to make. Elliot could feel the tension, but he didn't back down. This was his chance. He had to make them see the possibility of a different path, a path where peace didn't mean submission, and strength didn't mean domination. Elliot's heart raced as he stood before the leaders of Dara. The air in the room was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His mission was clear, but the path to achieving it was anything but. These rebels had been fighting for years, and their distrust of any authority, let alone an empire like Zalathra's, ran deep. But Elliot was determined to show them a different way, one where humanity could stand as equals, not conquerors. The rebel leader, the woman with the scar, Arya, crossed her arms, studying him with wary eyes. You really think you can convince us to stop fighting, human? To join some peaceful alliance with your queen? After everything she's done to us? Elliot stood tall, meeting her gaze without flinching. I'm not asking you to join anyone's empire, he said, his voice steady and clear. What I'm offering is a chance to build something better than war, something better than endless fighting. I know what Zalathra has done, but I also know that peace can be more than just surrender. It's a choice. Arya shook her head, her expression dark. Your queen doesn't offer choices. She takes what she wants, and we've felt that on our planet for too long. Elliot took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. He had to find a way to break through, to show them that humanity's strength wasn't just in fighting. It was in believing that something better was possible. I'm not here to change your world by force, he said. But you can't. Keep fighting forever. You've seen how much destruction war brings, you've felt the cost of it. But if you're willing to take a chance, if you're willing to listen, then maybe we can find a way to stop this cycle. Maybe we can find a way to end the war without more bloodshed. For the first time, there was a flicker of something in Arya's eyes, a moment of uncertainty. The other rebel leaders exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Elliot could see that they were considering his words,